The moment I realized my life was being dismantled, no one was yelling. No one was threatening me. They were smiling and waiting for me to agree. It happened in a beige office that smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon disinfectant, the kind of place designed to make you lower your voice without knowing why. A glass of water sat untouched in front of me. A pen lay perfectly aligned with a stack of documents I hadn't asked for. Across the table, 3 people watched me like I was a storm they'd already tracked days ago. And in the center of the table, between their hands and mine, sat my phone. Face down, silent. I'm Michael Avery. I'm 56 years old. And until recently, I believed that if something truly dangerous was happening to you, you would feel it arrive. Like a crash. Like a scream. Like the moment a machine finally fails after weeks of warning noises. I was wrong. Sometimes, danger arrives quietly, wearing concern like a uniform, and asking you to sign your name. Let me start earlier, before the paperwork, before the meetings, before I began questioning my own memory. I live outside Columbus, Ohio, in a development that looks identical no matter which street you turn down. Same roofs, same mailboxes, same small trees planted too close to the sidewalk. It's the kind of neighborhood real estate agents describe as stable, which really means nothing dramatic is supposed to happen here. I've worked for 29 years as a logistics manager for a regional manufacturing company, not an executive, not a nobody. The kind of role where if everything runs smoothly, no one knows your name, and if it doesn't, everyone suddenly remembers it. I like systems. I like order. I like knowing where things belong. That's important later. My wife Karen and I have been married for 18 years, second marriage for both of us. We learned early on that peace matters more than being right. We don't fight much. We don't surprise each other either. She has a daughter from her first marriage, Emily, 32. Smart, efficient. The kind of woman who uses color-coded calendars and sends follow-up emails after phone calls. People like that are usually praised. They're rarely questioned. Emily and I were never close, but we were polite. Cordial. She called me Mike. Never Dad. That was fine. I didn't need the title. I just wanted things to stay balanced. For years they did, until my birthday. I didn't want anything special. At my age, birthdays are reminders, not celebrations. Karen made dinner. A few texts came in. Emily sent a package that arrived early in the morning, left by the door like a favor. Inside was a smartwatch. Not top of the line, not cheap either. Clean, minimal, neutral gray band. There was a note tucked beneath it. Thought this might help you keep track of things. Happy birthday. I remember smiling. I remember feeling strangely seen. I'd mentioned just once, that sometimes I forgot small things. Where I put my keys. Whether I'd already sent an email. Normal stuff. Harmless stuff. The kind of things everyone jokes about when you pass 50. I put the watch on that day. It synced easily with my phone. Too easily. I didn't think much of it. At first it was useful. Reminded me to stand up, to drink water, to check my schedule. I even joked at work that I'd finally joined the future. What I didn't realize was that the future had joined me back. A week later, Emily called. Hey Mike, she said, voice light. Just checking in. How's the watch working for you? Fine, I said. Why? Oh, no reason. Just curious. Sometimes those things can be overwhelming. Overwhelming? The word stuck with me, though I didn't know why. After that, the calls came more often. Not intrusive. Just timed. How was your doctor's appointment? She asked one afternoon. I didn't have a doctor's appointment. Oh, she said, then laughed softly. Sorry, Mom mentioned you were thinking about scheduling one. Karen hadn't mentioned that. I was sure of it. Small things like that began to happen. Comments that didn't match conversations I remembered. Questions that assumed decisions I hadn't made. And then there was the email. It came from our bank. Routine subject line. Nothing urgent. But inside was a confirmation for a consultation regarding long-term financial planning options. I didn't schedule it. When I asked Karen, she hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Emily thought it might be a good idea, she said. She's just being proactive. Proactive. Another harmless word. That night, I took the watch off for the first time and set it on the dresser. I slept badly. Not from fear, just discomfort, like I'd forgotten something important but couldn't name it. The next morning, I wore it again. At work, my colleague Daniel noticed it. He used to work in IT security before transferring departments years ago. New watch? He asked. Birthday gift. He nodded, then frowned slightly. Mind if I look at it? I handed it over without thinking. He didn't say anything at first, just tapped the screen, swiped, checked settings. Then he looked up at me. Do you know who has access to this? He asked. What do you mean? This thing logs more than steps, he said quietly. Location, audio triggers, passive data. I laughed. It's a watch, not a spy movie. He didn't smile. Mike, he said, lowering his voice. This model isn't standard. Someone modified the permissions. Whoever set it up knows what they're doing. The air in the room changed. I felt it not panic. Not yet, but that cold mechanical sensation you get when a system you trust starts behaving unpredictably. That evening, I drove home slower than usual. Every red light felt longer. Every reflection in the windshield felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't tell Karen. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want to sound ridiculous. That's how it starts. Doubt doesn't attack your confidence. It borrows it. 2 days later, Emily stopped by unannounced. She brought groceries, soup, things that were easy to heat. She watched me carefully as I moved through the kitchen, asked if I'd been tired, if work was stressful, if I'd noticed any lapses. I answered honestly, why wouldn't I? The watch rested on my wrist, warm. That night, lying in bed, I said out loud, I should probably organize my paperwork better. The words floated into the dark. I don't know why I said them. The next morning, Emily texted, I can help with organizing if you want. It might be a relief for you. That's when I stopped pretending coincidence was still possible. I called Daniel, then a lawyer, then quietly a detective recommended by someone who owed Daniel a favor. They confirmed what I didn't want to believe. The watch wasn't just monitoring. It was feeding a narrative. Selective moments, isolated comments, carefully framed patterns, all pointing toward a version of me that was confused, overwhelmed, and in need of intervention. Intervention is a gentle word. It hides sharp edges. I began to understand the shape of the trap, not all at once, but slowly, as pieces slid into place with terrifying precision. And the most dangerous part? Everyone involved believed they were helping. That was when I made a decision that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. I left the watch on, and I started talking. Leaving the watch on felt like agreeing to be watched, but it also felt like the only way to see who was really on the other side. At first, I didn't do anything dramatic. No false confessions, no obvious bait. I just narrated my days the way I always had in my head, except now I let the words escape my mouth. Mundane things. Safe things. The kind of thoughts you never imagined could be used against you. Need to remember to call the insurance guy, I said one morning while tying my shoes. I should probably double-check that email before sending it, I muttered in the car. Nothing happened. Not right away. That was the most unsettling part. Silence gives you room to doubt yourself, to wonder if you've crossed from awareness into paranoia without noticing the line. At work, I watch myself the way a mechanic watches a machine he's responsible for. Inputs, outputs, patterns. Daniel helped me log everything: times, phrases, reactions. He never said, I told you so. He didn't need to. His calm made the situation feel real instead of imagined. 3 days in, the first reaction came. I'd been alone in the break room, stirring bad coffee, when I said aloud, I hate dealing with paperwork. Makes my head hurt. That afternoon, Karen asked, do you want Emily to help with bills? She mentioned you seemed overwhelmed. I froze for half a second too long. No, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm fine. Karen looked unconvinced, but she didn't push. She rarely did. That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. Pipes ticking, the furnace cycling on and off, familiar sounds that suddenly felt like evidence of my own sanity. I needed them to stay predictable. The next day, I pushed harder. In the car, alone, I said, sometimes I worry I'll miss something important. I hated how true it sounded. Emily called that evening. Hey, Mike, she said. Random question. Have you thought about setting up reminders for appointments? Or maybe having someone looped in, just in case? Just in case. I thanked her and changed the subject. My heart was racing, but my voice didn't betray me. Years of managing crises at work had taught me that panic is loud, control is quiet, That weekend, Emily came over again, this time with folders. "I thought we could organize some things," she said cheerfully. "You know, just to make life easier." Karen smiled with relief. She likes when problems look solvable. I watched Emily's hands as she spread papers across the table. She was careful, methodical. She asked questions that sounded supportive but steered answers in specific directions. "When was the last time you updated beneficiaries? Do you ever feel confused managing accounts? Wouldn't it be a relief if someone else handled the details?" Relief, help, support, all the words that make surrender feel responsible. I answered vaguely. Non-committal. I let the watch record uncertainty without confession. After she left, I went to the basement and opened the old metal filing cabinet I hadn't touched in years. Behind tax returns and appliance manuals, I found something new. A thin folder, too clean, too recent. Inside were drafts. Not final documents, but close. Durable power of attorney, medical proxy, guardianship assessment forms, notes scribbled in neat handwriting, short-term memory concerns, stress-related confusion, resistance likely frame as protection. I sat on the concrete steps and felt something solid crack open inside my chest. This wasn't care, this was strategy. I took photos of everything, sent them to Daniel, then to the detective. His response came an hour later. "This is coordinated," he said, "and it's accelerating." "What do I do?" I asked. "Nothing obvious," he replied. "Not yet." That night, Karen noticed the folder missing. "Did you move some papers?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. "I'm organizing." She nodded, relieved. Organization is comforting. It makes people feel safe. That was the first time I understood how easily safety can be weaponized. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Emily texted reminders, suggested appointments, offered to drive me places so I wouldn't forget. I started planning controlled signals. "I might need help with finances," I said once, while alone. The next day, Emily emailed a list of options. "I'm glad Mom's around to keep me on track," I said another time. Karen thanked me for trusting her more. Each reaction confirmed the same truth. Someone was listening, sorting, assembling a version of me that served their plans. But the deeper it went, the harder it became to maintain distance. Because some of what I said was real. I was tired. I did forget small things. I did want life to be simpler. That's how the trap works. It doesn't invent weakness. It amplifies it until it defines you. One afternoon, Emily sent an email titled "Next Steps." She proposed a meeting. At the bank, all of us together, calm, organized, supportive. Karen read it and sighed with relief. "This might be good," she said, "just to talk things through." I nodded. Inside, something tightened. That night, I took the watch off and held it in my hand. It was lighter than it should have been, smooth, innocent looking. I thought about how many people would wear something like this without question. How many already did? I almost smashed it. Instead, I put it back on. Because if I was going to step into the room they'd prepared for me, I needed to know exactly how they decorated it. The day before the meeting, I said one last thing aloud, very carefully. "I don't want to lose control of my life." The words felt like a confession. Emily called within the hour. "Mike," she said softly, "no one's taking anything from you. We just want to make sure you're okay." Her voice was calm, reassuring, practiced. I hung up and sat in the dark, the watch ticking quietly against my pulse. Tomorrow they'd ask me to sign. Tomorrow I'd find out how many people were waiting for me to say yes, and whether anyone would notice if I disappeared without a sound. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid fear had already burned itself out, but because my mind wouldn't stop assembling possibilities. Every version of the next day ended the same way. A table, a pen, a calm voice asking me to do something irreversible. Morning arrived without ceremony. Gray light seeped through the blinds. The house smelled like coffee and toast. Karen moved quietly, like someone trying not to disturb a patient. "You ready?" she asked. "Sure," I said. That word had never felt so hollow. The bank sat between a pharmacy and a dry cleaner, its windows tinted just enough to hide whatever happened inside. We parked, walked in. The air conditioning hummed steadily, predictable, controlled. Emily was already there. She stood as we approached, smiling the way people do when they're certain they're about to win something without resistance. She wore a blazer and carried a leather folder tucked under her arm like it was part of her body. "Hey," she said, "thanks for coming." No one thanked me for agreeing. We were led into a small conference room, beige walls, a laminated table, a pitcher of water with condensation running down its sides. Two bankers, one legal liaison. Everyone introduced themselves slowly, clearly, as if speaking to someone who needed extra time to process. I noticed that they didn't talk down to me. They talked around me. Emily did most of the explaining. She spoke about concern, about long-term planning, about making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. I listened, and then they slid the documents toward me. Not all at once. That would have looked aggressive. Just one stack. Neatly aligned. Tabs color-coded. My name printed everywhere it needed to be. "This doesn't mean you're giving anything up," the liaison said. "It's just a safeguard." Safeguard is another gentle word. I looked at Karen. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She believed this was help. I could see it in her shoulders, the way they finally relaxed. And then something inside me went very still. "Can I ask a question?" I said. Everyone nodded, relieved. Questions meant engagement, cooperation. "Who requested this meeting?" I asked. There was a pause. "Just long enough." Emily smiled. "I did, with Mom." "And who told the bank I was confused?" I asked. Another pause. The liaison glanced at Emily. She answered smoothly. "We were informed there were concerns." "Informed by whom?" I pressed. The room tightened. Emily leaned forward. "Mike, this isn't helpful." I nodded. "You're right. Let's be helpful." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed my phone on the table. Face up. "I'd like to play something," I said. Daniel had warned me this moment would come fast once it came at all. I pressed play. My voice filled the room, hesitant, uncertain, talking about forgetting things, about needing help. Carefully selected, cleanly edited. Karen's head snapped up. "What is that?" Emily's face drained of color. "That," I said calmly, "is audio recorded without my consent." Silence. The banker shifted in his chair. The liaison frowned. "Mr. Avery, thank you for watching." "There's more," I said. I slid copies of the drafts across the table. The guardianship forms, the notes, the phrases that framed resistance as proof of incapacity. Karen picked one up. Her hands began to shake. "Emily," she whispered. "What is this?" Emily stood abruptly. "This is being taken out of context." "Context?" I said. "You mean the part where you decided I needed replacing?" Her mouth opened, closed. The liaison cleared her throat. "We're going to pause this meeting." "No," I said. "You're going to listen." I turned to Karen. I didn't imagine this. I didn't forget. I was watched. Karen covered her mouth. Emily laughed a sharp, brittle sound. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I asked. "Then explain the watch." I removed it slowly and set it on the table. Daniel's analysis, the permissions, the access logs. The banker stood. "This meeting is over." 2 weeks later, the investigation began. Emily didn't come home that night. Karen cried in the living room until the sun came up. Not loud sobs, quiet ones, the kind that sound like something tearing. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I know," I said. That didn't fix anything. It just stopped the bleeding from getting worse. The following days were a blur of calls and paperwork, lawyers, statements, digital forensics. Every time I repeated the story, it felt less like mine. Emily sent one message. "You didn't have to destroy everything." I didn't reply, because the truth was simpler than that. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to disappear quietly. At work, Daniel clapped me on the shoulder. "You did the right thing." "It doesn't feel right," I said. "Survival rarely does," he replied. Karen moved out for a while. "Space," she said. "Time to think." I let her go. Some fractures don't heal under pressure. I stopped wearing smart devices, went back to analog, paper calendars, wired headphones, friction where there used to be ease. At night, the house was quiet again. Not the threatening quiet, the honest kind. Sometimes I thought about how close I'd come, how easily I could have signed, how no one would have stopped me. That was the part that stayed, not the betrayal, the silence. Because silence is where these stories end most of the time. And I was still here to tell mine. After the meeting, people kept telling me I was lucky. Lucky it was caught early. Lucky I had proof. Lucky I was still myself. I nodded every time, because that's what you do when language fails everyone in the room. But luck had nothing to do with it. Luck implies randomness. What happened to me was deliberate, incremental, and almost invisible. The investigation moved forward without urgency. That didn't surprise me. Institutions move slowly, unless money has already vanished or blood has already been spilled. I was neither robbed nor injured. I was merely almost replaced. There's no checkbox for that. Karen and I spoke on the phone every few days. Short conversations, careful ones. She apologized often, but apologies have weight only when the ground beneath them is stable. Ours wasn't. I should have noticed, she said once. Yes, I replied. Not unkindly, not angrily, just truthfully. Silence followed. She didn't argue. At work, my routine saved me. Systems still needed monitoring. Delivery still needed coordination. Problems still needed solving. The world didn't care about my private collapse, and in a strange way, that helped. Competence is grounding, but nights were different. At night, my mind replayed alternate endings, versions where I hadn't asked questions, where I'd been tired enough, trusting enough, embarrassed enough to sign. I imagined the moment afterward how quickly authority would have shifted, how gently. They wouldn't have taken my keys. They would have held on to them. They wouldn't have controlled my money. They would have managed it. They wouldn't have silenced me. They would have spoken for me. And everyone would have nodded, relieved that someone capable was finally in charge. That's the lie at the center of it all, that losing yourself can look like relief. Emily stopped contacting me after the investigation formally began. Through lawyers, I learned she'd framed everything as concern misinterpreted, stress, fear, overprotection. Words chosen carefully, polished smooth. Intent is hard to prove when harm hasn't finished happening. Karen returned home after 3 weeks. We didn't embrace, we didn't argue. We sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee like two people learning the shape of something broken. I thought I was helping, she said quietly. I know, I replied, but you don't trust me anymore. I looked at her. Really looked. Trust isn't gone, I said. It's just awake now. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. That was when I understood something else I hadn't wanted to. This wasn't just about Emily, or even about Karen. It was about a culture that confuses efficiency with authority and concern with entitlement. People think abuse is loud, obvious, cruel. But the most effective kind wears calm tones and carries forms. Weeks passed, then months. The case stalled, as these things often do. Emily faced consequences, but not the kind movies prepare you for. No dramatic arrest, no public reckoning, just restrictions, warnings, lines she couldn't cross again. And maybe that was enough. Or maybe it wasn't. What changed most was me. I stopped narrating my thoughts out loud, not from fear, but from respect. My inner life deserved privacy. I stopped apologizing for being cautious, stopped laughing off concerns to make other people comfortable. I learned to document everything, dates, conversations, decisions. Not because I expected another trap, but because clarity is a form of self-defense. Karen and I began counseling, slowly, painfully. There were days it felt pointless. Others where something loosened just enough to let light in. Some damage doesn't reverse. It just teaches you where to be careful. One night, months later, I found the watch in the back of a drawer. I held it for a long time, thought about throwing it away. Instead, I powered it on one last time. It blinked, waiting. I powered it off again and placed it in a box labeled evidence. Not because anyone asked me to, because I needed to remember that my life didn't almost disappear in a single moment. It nearly vanished in pieces, and pieces are easier to miss. There's a strange moment that comes after something almost destroys you. It's not relief. It's not gratitude. It's the slow realization that you are still responsible for the rest of your life. No one prepares you for that part. Months after everything settled into its new, uncomfortable shape, I was standing in the garage one evening, staring at a box of old paperwork I hadn't touched since the investigation wrapped up. Manuals, receipts, warranties, artifacts of a life built on maintenance and prevention. At the bottom of the box was a single envelope. My handwriting? Inside was a letter I didn't remember writing, but I recognized the mindset instantly. It was addressed to no one in particular, just thoughts, instructions, almost. If you're reading this, it means something felt wrong. Don't ignore it. Ask questions. Don't rush. Don't sign anything just to keep the peace. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and laughed softly, not because it was funny, because some part of me had known long before my mind caught up. That's what people don't understand about situations like this. The danger isn't that you don't notice anything wrong. It's that you notice it and then convince yourself it's not worth the trouble of addressing. After everything, friends asked why I didn't just walk away sooner, why I didn't confront Emily the moment I suspected something, why I didn't demand explanations, ultimatums, apologies. The answer is simple and uncomfortable, because I didn't want to be the problem. Men my age are taught to endure, to be reasonable, to keep things running. We're praised for being steady, not sensitive, for absorbing stress quietly so others don't have to. That instinct almost erased me. Karen and I are still together. Not because everything healed, but because we decided not to pretend it had. Trust didn't return as a single event. It came back in small, deliberate actions. Shared passwords, transparent conversations, a mutual understanding that good intentions don't cancel blind spots. Emily and I don't speak. That hurts more than I expected. I sometimes think about the little moments we shared before all of this, the driving lessons, the casual dinners, the way she used to roll her eyes at my old-fashioned habits. I don't know when care turned into calculation. I may never know. What I do know is this: she didn't see herself as a villain. That's the most dangerous kind of person. Life moved on. It always does. Work stayed busy. Problems stayed solvable. Systems stayed imperfect but manageable. I found comfort again in routine, but not the kind that puts you to sleep, the kind that keeps you alert. I still believe in planning. I still believe in support. I just no longer confuse either with surrender. Sometimes late at night, I think about how close I came to vanishing without a sound. No dramatic confrontation, no violence, just signatures and smiles and well-meaning phrases spoken on my behalf. That's what stays with me, not the fear, but the quiet efficiency of it all. If you're listening to this and thinking, that could never happen to me, I want you to pause. I was organized. I was responsible. I was loved. And it almost happened anyway. So here's what I've learned, take it or leave it. If someone starts speaking for you instead of with you, pay attention. If concern comes with paperwork attached, slow down. If peace requires you to shrink, it's not peace. Protect your voice, document your life. Ask uncomfortable questions before someone else answers them for you. And don't let embarrassment keep you quiet. Because these stories don't start with villains. They start with silence. Now I want to hear from you. Type 0 inches the comments if you believe most people would miss the warning signs until it was almost too late. Type 1 if you think you'd catch it early and stop it before it escalated. I read every comment. And if this story made you uneasy, if it reminded you of yourself or someone you care about, stay here. Subscribe. Share it with someone who still believes danger always announces itself loudly. Sometimes the most important fight you'll ever win is the one no one else realizes you're in. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room, the one telling you something feels wrong, is finally your own. Don't ignore it.